Good evening. This is the public hearing for the Northborough Community Preservation Committee for 2022-2023. Today is December 1st, 2022. We are in the Town Hall Selectmen's Meeting Room, and we are meeting with the hearing tonight for the purpose of reviewing proposals for the FY 2024 Community Preservation Act funds. For those who are interested, these applications are available here, of course, and also available for viewing at the Planning Department, Northborough Town Hall, during business hours, and they can be viewed online as well at the Northborough website. Go to town.northborough.ma.us, look for boards and committees, and under Community Preservation Committee, you'll see the link on the upper left. My name is John Campbell. I'm chairman of the committee. We are on TV tonight, very exciting, so I welcome anybody who's watching and observing remotely, and I welcome those in attendance tonight representing the applicants. We appreciate your time and all the effort you've done to put into your applications. Tonight, our purpose is to hear a brief presentation from each of 8 applicants, and we ask that you try to keep your presentation to about 10 minutes and allow another 5 or so for questions from the committee. Our goal is to get through 8 applicants' presentations by 9 p.m., and so we're going to move pretty quickly. When you make your presentation, I know you have remarks prepared, of course, but please emphasize the applicability of your program for CPA funds, the level of community support, and the urgency of your application for this year's cycle. And with that, without further ado, I will call up our first applicant. It is from the First Parish Church regarding steeple repairs, and we're going to recognize David Sherman. No? Anyone here speaking for them? Not at this time. Very well, we'll discuss it among the committee. I will state for the record, we had the application reviewed by Town Council because there had been some question among previous CPA applications for their applicability, given that they relate to a religious institution, and this is a public grant. Town Council's opinion is that the application and its purpose for the preservation of the steeple can move forward. So we have no reservation in considering it. I'll open it up to the committee. If anyone has a comment on what they've read in the application, details, please speak up, and we'll discuss it ourselves.
I guess the only thing I was remembering is, were we going to ask the Historic Commission whether they were going to rank these things?
And they have. We received a note from the chair of the Northborough Historic District Commission, Norm Corbin, regarding their last meeting in November. And I'll paraphrase. Norm's in the audience. Norm, feel free to pitch in, but I'll paraphrase. They gave top priority to the First Parish steeple repair and to the second application we're going to get to, which is the Historical Society window restoration. And in their second tier, they recommend the reserve account amount.
Can I correct you? I don't know if you can hear me. Can I correct you on that?
Yes, please speak up.
I'm sorry, can you go to a mic, please?
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Thank you, Norm.
So what we put down is for high priority, number 1 is the White Cliffs bond payment that has to be done.
Of course.
And the same high priority is the First Parish steeple because of the condition of the steeple. Then we had a medium priority, and that is for the Historical Society windows. And the lower priority is the historic reserves and the library historic marker.
Thank you.
Yep.
You know, Norm, I may call on you again, but the application is extremely thorough. But we had approved, and town meeting approved, previous repairs to the steeple, and they did not go deep enough, so wonder what confidence the First Parish representatives have this time that this is a sufficient scope. Have you had any discussions with them?
No, not really. I mean, I really prefer that they get a steep for their proposal.
I would have preferred it as well.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that I had tonight, you guys time today about it, so I'm sorry.
No trouble, maybe a misunderstanding, but
Yeah.
we will most likely keep the open hearing open through our next meeting, and we'll give an opportunity for any other applicants to follow up. Any other questions from the committee?
They're in order.
The fund request is $200,000. Says their total cost may get to $250,000. But we'll take it at face value for now. Any other questions, comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2. This is the window restoration and preservation of the Historic Society building. And we recognize Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
What do you want to tell us about needing windows?
I'd be happy to. Before I start, I just wanted to express from the Historical Society our gratitude and appreciation for the community for all the support that you've shown us over the last several years in funding a lot of our renovations. It's been a real shot in the arm, pun intended, to get through the COVID pandemic, so it's really appreciated. I just wanted to make that statement. So I'm Mike Duchesneau, and I'm the Vice President at the Historical Society. And I'll be presenting to you a little bit about our grant request for $71,000. So the project is really the restoration of 24 windows that we have within the building. There's a breakdown, as you see here, museum level. They have the large, these are the large ones at the top, 12 by 12, and then the two skinnier ones that are in the front, 9 by 9s, and the 8 by 8s are the ones that are at the street level. And then there's some of the 6 over 6 small windows, the double hung windows. These are all wooden windows. And the restoration process is to remove each of the windows and then applying steam at the restorer's facility to remove the old putty and remove the paint using a heat gun or some kind of dry heat. Condition the wood with a blend of linseed oil and turpentine. Apply a coat of oil primer and then 2 coats of paint, then return them back to the facility. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what we're looking to do. We started the process and looked around at people who are specialized in doing this kind of work, contacted about 5 of them, and we settled on Heartwood Window Restoration. They've been doing this work since 1996. They're very well. They have a lot of the skills that we need to do this. They're located in a small town in Charlemont, Massachusetts, which is near on the Millers River, near Chauvin Falls, where the Bridge of Flowers is located. So their project summary, I've kind of highlighted a few of the things here. They've done thousands of windows, but some of the highlights is the Lyman Estate, which is in Waltham. They did over 120 windows at that facility. and they've done a bunch of other high-profile projects such as the Moffett Ladd House in Portsmouth and the synagogue, one of the oldest synagogues in the United States, the windows done in Newport, Rhode Island. The Shaker Museum is another one, and numerous libraries, town halls throughout New England. The woman that I'm in discussions with has also taught a lot of these seminars. Recently, she did one in Worcester, talking about how to restore old windows. So I just wanted to, I took this out of the final report for the Lyman estate, and it kind of shows the ability of what they can do when they restore these windows, how beautiful the restoration project can be. This is the Lyman estate in Waltham, Massachusetts. And this is the person that will be doing a lot of the work. She's the owner of the company. Her name is Jade Mortimer. I lifted this from the final report, her working on one of the windows as well. So she's got a lot of the skills to do this kind of work, and exactly the kind of specialties, information, and knowledge that you need to do this.
You need a lot of patience, too.
Yeah. I wanted to just briefly let you know that we did receive unanimous support from the Northborough Historic District Commission, and I've included that copy available for you. So we're happy that we got that. I wanted to touch briefly on the project cost. We thought that the best way to do this was to do it on a unit price basis, because we know, what kind of windows we have, so we wanted to assign some kind of a cost to each one of those type of windows, and then just multiply by the number of windows we have, sum it up, and come up with a reasonable cost. So this is how it kind of breaks down. The total cost is, it comes to $71,000, adding a 15% contingency. Beginning the tour through the history here. This is a picture probably about 1906, we think. We're not exactly sure, but it's probably the best picture we have of soon after the building was first constructed. Has the steeple still in place. It's pre-1938 hurricane, so the steeple is just there. And it also has a lot of the shutters that have recently been restored back to the building. So this is what it looked like originally. And we also are registered, just to note that we are registered on the historic, National Register of Historic Places. And this is what the building currently looks like. The shutters are in place, obviously the steeple are not in place, but a couple of shots of the front of the building as it sits today. Getting into just sort of highlighting some of the windows. This is another shot of the windows on the side with the shutters current. So the 12 by 12s are the big ones on the top, and the 8 by 8s are the smaller ones on the bottom of the street level. These would be the focus of what we'll be doing, removing these and then having them restored. Here's a couple of pictures of inside the building, of the windows in various states of deterioration. They're wooden windows, they're still working, they function, but I think you can see that some of the paint's coming off. The putty that's there is starting to dry and flake off. So we're looking to kind of this project to help restore this back to original, or close to original shape. Just some more pictures of, that's probably the worst one on the top, on the left. Because the jamb is rotted, the sill is also rotted in that area. So we'll be looking to kind of address all these issues. This would be a picture of the second floor, the museum level, and there's some wrought, if you can see on the side of where the stile comes into the bottom, stile comes into the side. There's a little bit of rot down there. So it's just a matter of addressing these windows and getting them back into, they probably haven't been done in, we don't even know, but more than likely within, I would say 60 or 70 years, it hasn't really had much attention to it. And this is just a quick picture of what they look like in the outside. I mean, you can, it's not that clear, but you can, I think if you look, you can see where the outside, excuse me, like in here, there's a lot of the caulk is starting to dry out, fall out. So, we just want to address these before it gets any worse. And that's pretty much all I have. Sure.
So your proposal includes the repair of like the sills and other portions that aren't on the actual window themselves, like
No,
the
it's
casement and
just-
stuff like that?
This one is just the windows.
So when they take them out and those sills, like you showed pictures
Yeah.
of rot in the sill and casement, you have a contingency for that to be repaired while they're all out, or no?
Not at this point, that'll be the next level, the next phase. We're just
So
trying to
these
get
are strictly, they're gonna remove the windows, that component only, nothing, everything that's attached to the buildings, the tracks and all that, sills and all that kind of stuff is,
They'll do the
yep,
stops and the weather stripping. But as far as taking the jams out and, redoing that, the jam that I showed you that had some of the dry rot,
yep.
that's not part of this scope at this point. I mean, it was strictly just, we would like to do that, but I think it's just strictly a function of money at this point that, drives the cost up. We're trying to keep this in some reasonable amount of money.
Does the same vendor offer those additional repairs?
No.
Very much, so
Yeah.
they're focused on
Yeah, I've asked her that question a
Makes
couple of
sense.
times, and she said, no, we just do the windows. But,
the,
I was looking at the picture that I showed earlier of her working at the Lyman Estate. It looked like she was working on the jams on that one, so. But that's the message I get back is, I think we'll probably need to be looking at hiring a carpenter to help do that kind of work. Take the trim off, possibly repair the jams. But at this point, we're just looking to get the actual windows ship-shape, so to speak.
other questions, anyone?
I mean, the question always comes up about phasing, whether a project can be done over a multiple year period,
Yeah.
or even with the,
Right.
considering doing the windows incomplete instead of to cut, you were talking about, you were driven by cost, maybe
Yeah,
doing half the windows and doing them fully rather than doing all of them, just the windows.
absolutely. That's definitely a possibility. I might add too that we are looking at other sources of funding, grants from, one in particular from the Mass Historical Commission. And they have Round 29 that's out now. They offer grants for both the planning and also for capital improvements that would, and they specifically include window restoration as something that they would fund. And they will accept, it's a 50/50 matching grant. The society does not have that kind of money to put up for that, but they will accept funding from CPA funding as part of the match. My question is timing. The grant is due sometime, I believe, in February, and if we could work with the CPC to maybe get that 50/50 match, we would have to, it requires a letter of commitment from the commission to, say that money is now committed. So I wasn't sure of the timing as to how it would work. If you could submit the letter as part of the application by February 23rd, you know, we would like to pursue getting grant funding from that source as well, and have your money as, say, 50/50 backup. But, you know, at that point, it hasn't gone to town meeting, so as far as defining it as committed yet, I don't know if that's the strong enough term to use, or if that's, you know, you've committed, but whether the town money is committed, if that's sufficient. I mean, there is an upcoming information session coming up about this, and in fact, planning to go to and ask those kind of questions. But we would definitely entertain the possibility of working with you folks to see if we could get a 50/50 match, using your money and then the money from the Mass Historical to do this project. That's a possibility.
Well,
I don't know if anybody.
with regard to the timing part of your question,
Yeah,
in the event that this committee was to approve to recommend it to town meeting, then we certainly would be in a position to put that in a letter, so you have that ammunition.
yeah,
I guess I would ask you to, you just said yourself, you need to get more information on applying for the grant and what qualifies, and whatever help you can get from the district commission, or Lori here is a resource who's
Yeah.
very experienced in grant writing. Probably arm up with all of that and try to see what you think the opportunity is, and bring that information back, maybe by the time of our next meeting in a month.
sure,
And
yeah,
the more we have about that, the more would help consideration of it.
yeah,
And then, you know, following on Leslie's point, if it came to a point where we might only be able to approve a smaller amount, but you were able to possibly get a match for that,
yeah,
it might work out that it funds your project. So
that's kind of what I was thinking.
I think we'd be open to that, but we do, you know,
Have you done that kind of thing before? Has the CPC done that before, or is that?
I'm going to say, yeah, in some way, someplace. Sometimes these grants are reimbursement grants, so,
This is a reimbursement.
yeah, so, you know, I guess you need the commitment to apply, and then in the event that you were both awarded the grant from CPA and then also awarded the grant,
Yeah,
once you spent the money, then you'd get reimbursed, and we would make an agreement, again, in theory, with that applicant, that money would come back to the town and put in the CPA reserve account. So you'd get the grant out, but, you know, round numbers, we give you 70 grand, but you're getting 35 back. It's a win-win for both parties.
sure, sure,
So that's certainly possible. It's just too soon for us to determine
yeah.
what we're going to be able to afford to approve. There's a lot of competition in dollars this year.
Totally understand. Again, we really appreciate all your support that you've given us over the last years. It's greatly, it's been great to get that support.
It's a great resource in town, so
Thank you.
certainly is worth doing.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mike?
I have one quick one, if I could.
Sure, Jeff.
Have you done any research on what that additional carpentry work for the window would be?
No, not yet. You know, we did have quite a lot of discussion with another vendor, Cleary and Sons, who does similar work, and their number was over $200,000. And I believe a lot of their work was going to include the jambs and the sills, and replacing the storm windows as well. But at $200,000, we just didn't think it was prudent. So,
All right, thank you.
yeah, but that's something we obviously need to kind of pursue. That needs to be done, no doubt about
I
it.
do have one more question. Are the windows watertight at this point? So is it a?
They are watertight. You know, it's not like there's leakage coming in or any of that. I mean, it's not an imminent need for, you know, failure. We don't fix them like this year that they're gonna fall out. But as you can see, they're in somewhat disrepair and need to be addressed at some point. So that's part of our restoration process is to redo the windows, so that's why, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time on it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Very well, we're doing well here time-wise. The next application we're planning to review is funding to the Historic Reserve Account. Norm, you coming back? Tell us about the plan for this, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay over there? All right. So you've seen, assume you had a chance to take a look and see the plan. I'll give you a little background on that. So you can see where we're coming from, the Historic District Commission is coming from. There we go. So the Historic District Commission, we just finished our historic preservation plan about 2 months ago. And it's the first one that's ever been written for the town of Northborough. And in the process of doing that, we started to realize there were going to be some large projects coming in the next 5 years. So that's kind of the driver for why we're requesting some funding. The way it is now, there is no money in the historic reserves account. We put some in the past, but I think since 2017, we've been using up a lot of that money for other projects, so there's nothing in the account. And when we looked at just the scope of what some of these projects coming down the pike could be, you could see that if we had close to $1 million in the reserve account for 3 years, that would be very beneficial for future historic preservation. It kind of locks that money in for that purpose. There's a lot of competition for CPA money right now. So that's where the logic is. Again, it was trying to plan ahead for future expenses. We certainly, we started thinking about this in the summer. Since the summer, a few other projects have popped up. Certainly the steeple came out of the blue in September, and then I know the Historical Society window project has been in the works for a while. So there's one thing we do recognize is to request $350,000 for this year. It could be a challenge, recognizing that there's other priorities that might have to be spent for us. But we do want to set that precedent of getting some funding into the reserve account this year. We want to start that practice. You'll be seeing, for the next few years, you'll be seeing a very similar level of requests from us for future projects. So in the application, what we pulled together was just really ballpark numbers, possibilities for projects. You know, there's possible funding for the Aqueduct Bridge Walkway. There's we've been approached by the Trinity Church that they may want an elevator, and putting in handicap accessibility in a historic building is fully acceptable for CPA funding, and that's going to be top dollar value. The Historical Society, between the windows, they also have other projects they're thinking about down the pike. But I'll be honest, my primary concern with this is White Cliffs. There's no more money in our budget for White Cliffs. If something comes up, and we'll know in a week or two, if there's a requirement for additional funding for the restoration of any part of White Cliffs, we don't have a dollar for that. And I'd like to know that there's some money in the reserves account, so 2 years or 3 years from now, we have a pot that if we have to go for some money, I'm not saying we will, but if we have to go for some funding, we have a pot that we can come from. So that's primarily the logic for the $350,000 request for this year. So any questions?
Anyone?
So when you look at it, I mean, right now, we're $750,000, right, in funding, total funding per year, or this year,
In new revenue?
new revenue, right?
Yeah, 770 is our target for new revenue coming in.
So you're asking for half of all new revenue to go into historic?
I have to ask. You know, if I don't ask, it's zero.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know, it's not zero. We've always funded historic super well.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, it's been, I think, one of the main focuses of the CPC here. Just perspective in terms of
No, and you know, you already got, was it 180 grand for the bond payment is already come up historic. I recognize that, and that's gonna be another 3 years, I think,
We have
but, so all we're trying to do is kind of
one,
raise
two,
a
three,
flag here and
four,
say,
five.
there's stuff coming down the pike, and how do we handle it down in the future, rather
Yeah.
than getting surprised.
So this would be similar to a reserve like open space, so you can negotiate when something comes up unexpected.
Exactly, to have it in a reserve account, no commitment for spending it at this point.
So the ideal is $1 million, but you can work towards it less each year, but
Correct.
like some commitment, so you know.
You got it.
It's a little different than open space, because open space goes into the Conservation Commission, and that
Yeah.
does not have to go for town meeting. This would still, spending would actually still have to go before town meeting. So the money would be set aside, but the approval would still have to go to town meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. It's basically a cushion, right, to start.
Well, the request is,
Would it be project specific or?
Well, to utilize the money, it would have to be a specific project.
Yeah.
You gotta do it at the end of the, when you start doing the crunching numbers, and some money comes out of it.
Yeah.
Whether the reserve, the historical reserve would be next to the pots.
so bringing up a discussion we had at a prior meeting, I think our October meeting, was along these lines of what might White Cliffs need? Obviously, it needs a lot, but among the things that it needs, what portions could be considered qualifying for more CPA funding? And we can't answer that specifically yet. We have a consultant involved, and we're seeking partners, and there's, what I'm hearing, excellent progress on the possibility of that. But I think the discussion concluded that it's hard to answer what might be needed until we know the direction that's gonna be followed. You know, and what, if there was a partner, and if there was an effort that moved forward, what's the goal of that? And what's the scope for what White Cliffs would become? And then we'd be talking about, okay, well, if we're rebuilding some portion of it, you know, what quantity of it is historic, for instance? Is there any other aspect of White Cliffs that would qualify under another category? I don't know yet, but could some of the property be, you know, recreational at some point that sends us down another category? We haven't even fully concluded what the property could be. Some of us have assumptions in our minds, but, you know, we haven't ruled anything out, right?
No, clearly nothing's been ruled out, and there's a lot of opportunity there, but there's, you know.
For the record, you're on the White Cliffs Committee. isn't it?
Correct, I'm on the White Cliffs Committee.
Thank you.
Along with Todd, so with the few of us representing here. My concern is just to have some funding available in case there is a need for additional funding. We know the building needs restoration and renovation, and that could clearly be CPA funded funds. But I don't know, what we don't know is if someone comes in to partner with us, if they're all set with their money and they don't need anything else, it's just kind of, I just want to have it as a fallback, so that if we do need some money, it's available. Of course. There's no way, you know, anyway, that's my logic. And White Cliffs is the one that's obviously of particular concern to me, but all these other projects would fall into line too.
Yeah, I mean, from my view, we bought this thing, and now we gotta see it through. And it's gonna require some level of public support, and this is one of the places it's gonna come from. One thought I had, I don't know that these makes a difference, but this and like the conservation, right, you could leave that money unallocated, right? You could just leave it in unallocated bank, and then depending on what came in, you could move the money left, you could move the money right.
Well, yeah, to be specific, if this board were, if this committee were to recommend and town voted to designate your 350, let's use the example, into the historic reserve account, it's committed to historic restoration projects. We can't move it back out to any other account or back to the unreserved account. So that's the one stipulation. And as Leslie pointed out, one town meeting might put it in, but we would need another town meeting to spend it,
Right.
to, you know, to put it toward.
For any of these projects.
Correct. As she stated correctly, it differs from things we've done on the committee and a town meeting for placing in the Conservation Fund, where now Conservation Commission could use it without going to town meeting. And Same when we allocated money to the Northborough Housing Corporation. And that was successful, so we don't have a mechanism at the present time for an historic, reserve company, so to speak.
Correct, right now we're just being reserved. But we, obviously you have to think it through, but if you put it into the unreserved account, and I don't have money into the historical, just looking at what the list of projects are this year, the unreserved account is gonna go bye-bye, and, I'd rather have it in my back pocket knowing that there is some money that down the road to be used for historic, of course, all of the historical.
I understand your logic in that, but it also, all these, just like the application we just heard for the Historical Society and the church, they all have to come with their own individual application anyway.
Right.
So, and especially, I think in this year, where there's such a heavy load of historic elements here, again, it's the priority of the Historic Society. But I think you identified the other ones as greater priority versus
Yes, we put this as the third priority.
third
recognized.
priority.
If anything, the steeple came out of the blue, and that's, 200,000, so that's the one that's, we didn't plan on that, otherwise I probably could put 200,000 in the reserve account. But that's just the way the timing is.
In addition to the 180
Yeah,
going into the
that
bond,
was
the
fantastic.
bond.
So, and probably more than anything is just a heads up, you'll be seeing this request on a regular basis for the next few years.
Fair enough. Any other questions for Norm on this one? Hearing none, we'll move on to our fourth line item, which is the library historic marker. And I believe Norm is presenting again.
Yes, and Jennifer, probably mispronounced her name, Peru, the library director, is also participating in this.
Excellent. What is it that you'd like to have?
Anyway, so as you know, we have this historical marker program that we've been doing for years. If you read in our preservation plan, we have a table of historical markers that we want to do for the next 5 or 6 years. And this one, we're kind of focusing right now on Main Street. Seems a lot going on Main Street. Let's make sure people realize how historical it is. So an obvious one is the library, and the Gale Library, especially putting a marker talking about the Gale family and their influence on the library. So that's where this comes from. It's a small ticket item. So it keeps it bigger because you guys see this is going up, but it's looking at $5 grand for the marker.
Norm, where do you think this would be installed specifically? Like at sidewalk level, or?
There's two options. I think, to be honest, I think the wording of the sign and the location of the sign, I think the trustees of the library should make that decision.
Okay.
But out front would be nice in one hand, but then the main entrance would also be more visible. But I think that we can make that call.
You're talking about the main entrance
They'll be
down
in
to the
back,
side?
By the parking lot. Yeah.
I understand. You said, Main Street visibility, but you meant historic properties on Main Street.
Yes.
Other questions for Norm, anybody?
You promised to put our name on it, though, right?
Yeah, we've been doing that. The bottom line says.
It's not on the sample, that's all
Oh, no,
I'm...
the sample's no problem. Yeah,
All
the
right.
sample's no problem. That's why we're not making it yet.
Now, Todd needs his name, not.
Oh, okay, talk like that.
If I give the
We can do that.
$5,000, maybe.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm, on that one as well. All right, doing excellent on time. Next up on our list is the Aqueduct Multi-Use Trail Feasibility Study. And we recognize Ashley Davies of the Open Space Committee and also Amy Paretsky of Planning Board. Thank you both for coming.
Thanks for having us. So we're here to ask for, talk about our application for funding for a feasibility study for the Aqueduct Trail. the Trails Committee did a great job about 5 years ago, really getting the NWRA to agree to allow pedestrian access on the Aqueduct Trail, which has been great. But the use, I think, is pretty limited, and I don't know that people really know it's there, really feel comfortable using it, and so with the influx of funding through ARPA, kind of felt like now is the right time to think about, and with Complete Streets and all the other work that's being done, now is the right time to think about formalizing this trail and try to make it a real community asset. So you can go to the next. So the section of the Aqueduct Trail in Northborough is about 6.6 miles. It connects up with Westboro, right around the wildlife management area, Cedar Hill, and then it connects up with Berlin. Right now, Westboro has already done a feasibility study and are getting to work on their portion of it. Berlin is interested in working on their portion, you know, if we're successful with working on this. So, I mean, the benefit here is that, you know, making this either paved or stone dust, it will be ADA accessible, and it'll be something that's more approachable to the community, similar to the rail trail in Hudson. And it could potentially be a commuter asset, and right now, the way it is, it really connects up with a number of properties in town. So I've listed them kind of in order. Down in Westboro, we start at Cedar Hill, Stowing, the wildlife management area. It connects right there. Next, it connects up with Bartlett Pond, which is not far from where Watson Park is. And then to Algonquin Regional High School, you know, kind of where the warehouses are going in. And then to Peasley, then through the center of town, it passes right by the police station as well as Memorial Field, then crossing over the Aqueduct Bridge. It does pass close to, sorry, what was that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, it is there, right? But it's not, you know, paved or stone dust, and it's not graded in a way that people can access it with wheelchairs, things like that. So it goes across near Edmund Hill Woods, then the senior center, and then from there up to Berlin. So it has potential to really connect a lot of great assets in town, not only other trails, but, you know, the police station, the fields, the schools, which is really exciting. So the feasibility study is needed because we really need to know what sort of grading is needed at road crossings, what sort of safety measures need to be put into place to make these road crossings appropriate and accessible for the trail. And potentially at a couple of these road crossings, there might be the need for easements on private land, pretty limited way. So the feasibility study would lay out costs, requirements, and kind of what is needed to kind of make this happen. And the reason we feel like now would be a good time, the Aqueduct Bridge project is kind of gaining steam, and having both of them have this initial feasibility planning phase done would allow us to present a more ready picture for state funding when we go for trail funding for this. And just to note, you can go to the next slide. I'll skip ahead, but so I'll just stop here. But the other exciting thing is that this, if Berlin's portion does get completed, this would connect up with the Mass Central Rail Trail, which is an effort that the state is fully behind to kind of connect trails, rail trails, other trails from Northampton all the way to Boston. A lot of it has been completed. There are a lot of portions that are pending and a couple portions that need work. But this is, you know, it has great possibility for commuter access, and the state really supports this kind of work because it provides an alternative transportation avenue as they're trying to get cars off the road. So you can head to the next slide. Touched on this, the Aqueduct Bridge, it's you know, it had CPA funds awarded last year. Work is being done now, so they're not asking for funds this year, but probably will in the future. So we felt this was the time that we could kind of sneak in and get some funding for the feasibility study for the Aqueduct Trail and kind of join the two together at some point. We can head to the next So the multi-use trail is something that even the Central Mass Planning Commission has put as a priority in one of their studies. It is also a community, it is a priority for the community as well, so skip to the next slide. It was voted as one of the top 10 projects in a list of 24 for the Complete Streets study, and I was gonna talk about this before. It's on the list for Complete Streets, but it's not a project that's appropriate for Complete Streets funding. It's too large. Complete Streets funding is fairly limited, and so it is on there because it's a community priority, and we want to show the state when we go for funding, grant funding, that it is something that community wants to see done. And so it's on that list. It's a top priority on that list, but it's not something that would take the place of another project for Complete Streets funding. And it was voted as a top priority by the Master Plan Implementation Committee. It meets a lot of the master plan goals. And we did get support from Open Space Planning and the Historic Commission as well. And when we did surveys for the master plan as well as the Complete Streets, it was something that showed up as a priority and matched well with priorities that came out as results in the surveys. So that's really it. Here's some photos of it that Amy took, which are great and kind of just show the status of it right now. It's grassy, it's beautiful. But there are just those tricky parts where we're getting up to Route 20 and coming down from Route 20 and heading under other roads and just places where it needs a little assistance, and just formalizing it, I think, would allow it to be really accessible to the community.
I had a first question, if I could cut in, and it's regarding the slide you just had, or things like it, but in the feasibility study, would you identify in the scope that you wanted, that we want you to address these crossings? And in particular, getting under Route 20 has always been of interest to me. Or would you let the consultant, have more free rein to point out those things that need to be addressed? I just wondered how specific you wanted it to get, as opposed to just getting costing.
Yeah, I think the main portion of the study will be to address those crossings and to say what should be done and recommend some avenues to take. I don't know, I'm sure we can ask, can we look into going under Route 20? Is that feasible at all? I would think that that being considered in this study, it could be considered, but then it's gonna need some serious, design work and after the study.
Yeah, I wondered if that would be an outcome of the study,
We would need.
here's what you might do. I don't know if it's,
Yeah.
burrowing down, or if it's,
That's what Don Byrne from
if it's
Westboro
leaping
was talking
over,
about.
or it's a bridge, or what is it,
Yeah.
That seems like a major obstacle to connecting the south to the Aqueduct Bridge.
Don Burns done his in Westboro, and he talked to us a lot, and he said there are things like going under the bridge that might be a bigger goal, and then the feasibility study will have a little route around until you have the money to do something like go under a bridge, or so it should show different ways, options, yeah.
And it's certainly not something that's gonna be something we can fund all at once. It's gonna be a big project. We would probably have to take it in chunks, and but just kind of getting this study done would allow us to do that over time. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, so we're looking at the WDA proposal. They're not outlining any construction or anticipated construction costs?
They said they would do that, but they're not gonna be able to provide us with the full details on construction. That would be something that would come later. So it's really about what's needed, and then from there, we would decide which pieces, and then go and seek some further designs on that. But they will provide estimates of costs.
Estimates of construction costs out of it?
Yes.
I have a question, but it's probably towards Scott. It says here in the maintenance section, you would like to see it paved. Would that be all 6.6 miles?
Yes. Stone dust is problematic
No, I
on
just
the
mean
long-term
so that-
maintenance when it comes to wheeled access, whether it be baby carriages, wheelchairs, or what have you.
I thought there was a difference. If you pave it, then you have to meet different state requirements. I just remember because I was working on a bikeway someplace else, that if it was a greenway and you kept it unpaved, you didn't have to meet the stricter standards.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, and I'm guessing only, but I had heard that. Which actually, I did have a question on similar to that, which is, are we even allowed to change the surface? So do we know that already?
Yeah, we spoke with MWRA and they were fine with either one. So we were uncertain of that when we first started looking at this and whether even stone dust would be allowed, but then what they replied and they were fine with that. As long as we maintain it, then it's okay. So.
One of the challenges with determining if pavement is an alternative is the structural integrity of the underlying culvert. Installing asphalt is it imparts a lot of loads on the underlying soils. So if that culvert is in rough shape, you can't put a heavy vibratory roller on it and have it fall through. That's one of the analyses that's being done that was funded through the CPC last year across the Aqueduct Bridge. Specifically, is that strong enough to support the construction?
So is this study gonna review both stone dust versus paving it? Because I would think paving it would be many multiples more expensive.
Yeah, I think we can advise on that. I mean, if that's the preferred outcome, then we probably put that in the RFP. So this would require us to go out for bids, 3 bids at least. So I think we could, nail that down and put that in before we go out for bids.
Would you be looking to plow it?
If you didn't plow it, it could probably be used for cross-country skating and
That's true.
stuff
You can
like
eat it so it
that.
melts.
That would be.
Get hot
quite
water out of
cost.
the aqueduct.
When you presented to Historic, Norm had mentioned that he didn't think it was 6.6 miles, he thought it was more like 4 miles. Did that get,
My number is 4.4 miles.
did that get investigated?
Yeah, we didn't end up, sorry, I forgot to do that, I was gonna look on GIS, but the CMRPC did have 6.76, so I'm not sure.
The feasibility study was all showing.
Yeah,
If you do the math, if you do the GIS, it's 4.4.
okay.
Yeah. The only thing, the other 2 miles, the only thing I can think of is that's the part that's in Berlin. That might make sense.
Oh, maybe they
Because it's
rolled
almost
that
2
in.
before it gets to the tunnels.
Right, yeah,
That
Berlin
might
has
be
two.
part of it.
What kind of
Good.
impact would the length of the trail have on the feasibility study?
I mean, the cost would be much lower, because it's, something in the range of what, $1 million?
No, the feasibility study itself, would the feasibility
For
study
the,
itself be?
it could affect that, yeah, so I can go back and ask, WGA what effect that might have on it. They did give an updated estimate, which I put in the slides, but I didn't mention, from last year to this year, it increased, just because of inflation and the cost of everything, to 93.5 was their estimate of the cost of the feasibility study. So our ask for 100,000 is really an up to, thinking that, we're not sure where these 3 bids might come in, and some might be higher, some might be lower.
Once it was completed, what do you visualize as allowable uses? So let's say it's a paved surface. It could be a bike trail, and would it be designated lanes for that, since it's also accessible for walking and possibly even handicap, or wheelchairs and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Is that what you
envision,
envision?
I would envision that this would be very similar to a rail trail, I mean, it has the route in place, just like a rail trail would, so I think it's, really done in the same way, and probably would, if you can estimate the cost of what a rail trail would be, it'd probably be similar. With
The
paving, for
feasibility
sure.
study might ask us to how wide you're thinking, if you're gonna have pedestrians and bikers.
Well, your width is probably somewhat set
Determines,
by
yeah.
the
Aqueduct.
berm, if you will, that you have. If you're trying to build it out wider, that would be even more cost, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you'd wanna keep it as narrow as possible.
Has any town finished off their portion of the aqueduct in this way yet, that you know of?
The Cochituate, has done stone dust, so they have, and they've been maintaining that, and I know recently they were, resurfacing their stone dust.
That's in Framingham
Framingham.
area? That's the same aqueduct, right?
Yep. I mean, it's connected, yeah.
Interesting.
I think it's called the Kitchissewit down there, I'm not sure, but, yeah.
So what's the slide that you're showing now about the Westboro fees, on this,
Oh, yeah,
On
we
the
didn't mean to
STIP.
get to that one.
I thought there were more slides. I expected
No, that's fine,
Those are my notes, if someone was asking other ways of funding, because that's what Westboro's using to.
yeah, I think we mentioned this to Scott at some point, and it was kind of like, that's like a long-term, long-range plan to get into this STIP funding and.
they're putting out 24 million
It's just
That's
federal
Westboro.
funding.
for their portion of the trail? Or is that a
No, they said
different?
their cost was 24 million but it was only gonna cost the town 2.6.
So
Only?
the STIP program is funded through the state, Surface Transportation Improvement Program. It's very similar to the TIP. So the town does the design work for it, you get on a state funding list. That list is 5-year projection, but in reality, it's more like a decade out. And it gets shuffled around as costs change and funding gets available. So it's, as Ashley said, and she's 100% correct, it's a long-range funding mechanism.
Which, I mean, this is probably gonna be a long-range project, so maybe that's okay, and maybe it's an option, but that would be something we could think about. Feasibility study.
That's cut and paste from the Westboro feasibility.
Yep.
So a few of our questions seem to be around the specifics of the scope that the feasibility study would encompass. And is this something you could work more to define?
Yep.
Since it's a fairly sizable amount that you're seeking, recognizing it may be less after you bid it out, or, but that would be important to, I'm not seeing it exactly in the application, as, these are the outcomes that we expect to get from it.
Okay.
If there's any precedent from what Westboro got or is getting, that, I see that as the guide that you've been using so far.
Okay.
Maybe you could come back to us a little bit more detail in that area.
Yeah, we can do that.
Um,
It's probably just more my inexperience in this work. To not know, what questions to ask. I did ask WDA, some clarifications on what would be included, but, it sounds like I need to ask even more detail.
Right, I mean, the goal is clear, but, there's a lot of details, and even your own pictures, you can see the different obstacles, and, what do you hope to get as the outcome of it?
I'd be happy to help if you want.
Right, okay.
I helped with the
Thanks.
aqueduct as well. so
Yeah,
help as well.
okay.
And Todd, you are correct, I was racking my brain, the surface differences criteria are different in the Architectural Access Board, the requirements, so when you have a stone dust, you're allowed to undulate a little more than asphalt. Like a hard floor, you can't have any lips greater than 1/2 inch. It's a little bit different when you have a stone dust, the criteria is different, so it is looser.
I was wondering whether it was like like if you paved it, you had to put up guardrails, things like that. Whereas if it was left relatively green, then you didn't need to do all of the street furniture that you would ordinarily for a fully built-out bike path.
As far as fall protection, there is no difference, but the surface quality can be less on stone dust than it is on asphalt.
Okay.
I was thinking of reaching out to Holliston. They did a stone dust trail, and I don't know if the pictures are there, but I did ride it, and it was so packed. I felt like I was on asphalt, and there were, bikers, there were carriages. I didn't see any wheelchairs, but I thought it was a great path. I didn't see the difference between that and asphalt that much, but it might degrade over the years. So
And as the asphalt, you have a 20-year lifespan. Generally, after 20 years, you come back in and you surface it. On stone dust, that's more like a 5-8 year lifespan. You come in, you regrade it, you add some stone dust and compact it. So what ends up happening is, everybody knows when you got a gravel driveway, you got a puddle. Any one of our trails that has a dirt driveway access, you get a puddle, you splash the mud out over and over and over again. Next thing you know, you don't have a compliant surface. So,
the price difference was huge, though.
yeah.
When I priced it out, it was $22,000 a mile for the stone dust, but it's over $1 million for the paved.
It'd be interesting to get a cost estimate for
Yeah.
the work every 5 years to redo, the
Right.
stone versus 20 years for the
And they can make recommendations on locations where it's typically problematic. So you have asphalt aprons at grade crossings, because that's when people congregate. You have asphalt maybe in low spots where there may be drainage issues. So there can be spot treatments that alter it. And then you can do geo-reinforced stone dust that gives it a little more stability. So there's a lot of alternatives, and that's what Waterman would look at.
Okay.
And they'll also do like because it just seems like there's not a lot of, like, the access points are not built out for this particular trail. They're all kind of like side of the road kind of access point things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just that list of spots where it comes to town assets, I think those would probably be the places that could be parking, and, you know, maybe there's a more formal way to access the trail from each one of those. So then you don't have to deal with any additional parking. You park at Memorial Field, or you park at Watson Park.
Yeah, when I walked it, there were quite a few. There was that hiking trail off of Rice Ave, was right on the aqueduct, and then the senior center was across the street from another section. There were quite a few parking lots.
Wouldn't part of the attraction of a trail though be getting off the paved surface?
Well, I mean, you could park and then you're off.
No, I mean, for a trail, couldn't it just be a natural vegetated worn path?
Well, that's what it is now, and we do have lots in town, and certainly I agree with you. But I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that, you know, that's not the only reason to do this. I think, you know, it just allows more members of the community to be able to access it, you know, people with wheelchairs, people with strollers, whatever it may be. But it is interesting when you formalize it and you pave it and you put, you know, benches or whatever it may be, signs, a lot more people use it.
That sounds like it could, because of the connectivity, it could,
Right.
in the length, it could actually be a, you know, like commuter trail, things like that.
Right, exactly. I mean,
But you
that's
couldn't go on a trail
kind of
for
I think that's what CMRPC envisions when they have it as a priority in their plan. You know, this is potentially a commuter asset, it's something people could bike up to the Mass Central Rail Trail and out into, you know, Metro West, Greater Boston.
I know, I walk Chauncey almost every day, and I walk the paths, and there's no one out there, and there's tons of people on the paved area, you know, so there is, it certainly is a use, you know, a use preference for the, you know, for the pavement or and even that's a rough, very rough paved area, but it's at least, you know, it's a more accessible road type path versus, you know, the hiking trail kind of path, you know.
And we do have a pretty extensive trail network in town, too.
Any other questions from the committee? Well, very good presentation, Amy and Ashley, thank you.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Yep,
and
good
we'll
potential.
work on getting some more information.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we are doing excellent.
Taking a header.
The next application to consider is the construction of the ADA accessible trail at the senior center. And we recognize Scott Charpentier and Brian coming up as well.
Oh, okay.
I'm joining you tonight.
Brian Belfer of the Open Space and Trails Committees, who's worked a lot on this, and
So that's a good segue from the prior applicant. So this is the trail that CPC approved funding for design last year. We were talking about different surfaces. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
So what we're proposing are 3 different surfaces. The asphalt loop here, for maybe the, for cost-saving purposes. We have limited asphalt. This color is all stone dust here. And then these lighter colors are existing wooded trails.
could you present it again forward so the camera can see?
There we go. So the black is asphalt, the darker gray would be stone dust, and then the light browns are existing trails. It provides connectivity to 2 existing trailheads. The goal and objective is to provide accessible trail network around the senior center, not just for their patrons, but for the community. Funding last year for design services the work is underway. We've completed the wetland flagging. The land survey is nearly complete. We expect to be submitting environmental permit applications next month, well, now it's this month, in December, with final design proceeding through the winter, and in hopes that you approve, or recommend approval for funding and town meeting allocation. We can then go out to bid and hopefully start construction next year. The multiple surfaces, again, is for cost savings, as well as providing the closest and shortest loop for the least ample, I guess, for lack of better terms, and then the stone dust a little farther out. As I indicated before, stone dust takes more maintenance. You have to get in there frequently, more frequently to maintain low spots, puddles, things like that, so you maintain accessibility. This has, it's about 4,100 linear feet. It has two trail connections that I just described. There's the largest small loops, and then we have a bunch of scenic overlooks with benches, one of which is out on the peninsula with the pond. The entire route will be accessible, both cross slopes and longitudinal slopes, and that's where we are. I don't know if you have anything to add, Ryan?
No, I mean, I think that you covered it extremely well. I think one of the things to note is that, at every stage, we've had nothing but like positive feedback from anyone we've talked to so far. And which just feels like there's a whole lot of desire. It's not just from trails or just from any one person to have a resource like this available in town.
One of the struggles I think that a lot of communities have with their trails is maintaining them. Northborough has an extensive trail network. The wooded trails are very low maintenance, but there is maintenance associated with it. Removal of downed trees, significant tripping hazards due to erosion need to be taken care of, crossings of wetlands with wooded bridges, keeping the stone dust limits open and in a loop reduces the amount of extensive maintenance needed. It's easier to get in and out when it's a relatively short route, and there's a lot of portals. If you have a long trail that doesn't have a lot of portals and you need to dress stone dust 2.5 miles in, that's very costly to get in there. You're not getting large construction equipment in there. So you're going in there with small, expensive equipment with small loads. That means this trail is a little easier to maintain than maybe a longer, more limited access to stone dust trail.
Questions from the committee?
Amazing project.
The visual of it is excellent, seeing the enhancement to that property, not just for those that already use the senior center, but, being able to drive up and walk a nice trail.
I hope it brings more users to the senior center.
Yeah.
It's another asset that maybe families can go to and see and realize there's a senior center available that provides services beyond just, an affordable, tasty lunch.
And if I could be so bold as to recommend to the committee that there's already a footpath there for the bulk of this, so if you have a chance and you haven't actually walked it before, go give it a walk. It's a really nice trail just in its current form.
I like the idea of the different surfaces, that way cutting costs, but also putting the pavement where, as you say, most likely to be used for shorter walks or less amble. Seems polite enough. Maybe that's a good idea. Is there, in the design study that was approved at town meeting, is that still ongoing? Those funds still being spent toward the study, and do you anticipate any leftover from that original allocation?
We've contracted with Weston and Sampson to do the design work. The scope of services includes everything through development of construction documents. What it does not include is bidding and construction administration services. That'll be included in the next phase in the event we get funding. It's a affordable budget, $28,500 for quite an extensive land survey.
Yeah.
This survey work is probably almost half of what the budget is. We're assisting as staff through the permitting process with the local conservation commission. So we're doing what we can to keep the budget manageable.
You are historically quite good at, being conservative on the budget. How do you feel about this budget being adequate for what you want to see?
I'm more scared lately with budgets than ever before. Prices are very unpredictable. We're still waiting on benches it's been 14 months to receive park benches. We try to maintain uniformity across our facilities so it looks nice and the community sees what they expect to see. In doing that, it's been difficult to get materials. I'm comfortable with the estimate. It's in a good position. We have a 10% contingency as well. You're familiar with how I generally manage construction projects. I never want to come back for more, and that's my goal and objective. And we have another pandemic and some seriously unexpected things. I'm confident that the budget is adequate for the project.
So the benches will be the same as the town common?
We're looking for benches very similar to not the town common, our parks, and so Ellsworth and Bassett, we just put in some new benches there as well. Town common was different. We had to have some unique style seating at the War Memorial, and we wanted to maintain some continuity at that one single ground that would not necessarily be appropriate at a colorful playground, saying.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, guys. Excellent presentation. We are excited about it. That brings us to the 7th item on our agenda, the application for Phase 2 of the Northborough Dog Park. Scott is staying with us, I see.
Thank you. Yes.
You may continue on talking dog park.
Excellent. All right. I will give you a little overview of where we are today and how we got here and where we're going next. So, you're aware of the CPA funds were allocated for siting and preliminary design for our dog park. That was allocated last year, an amount of $35,500. We hired our landscape architecture firm, Weston and Sampson, to assist us. Staff and some citizen liaisons looked through every town-owned parcel in Northborough to identify which ones would and could be viable to accommodate a dog park. There are criteria that are needed and criteria that you do everything you can to meet. Needs are size and soils and access. You have to be able to get access to it. It has to be of sufficient size, and the soils can't be sopping wet. You're not going to put a dog park in a wetland. So that narrowed, that eliminated a bunch of parcels. You then start looking at appropriateness of the surrounding land uses. So that would throw out some parcels. So for example, we looked at one parcel that was brought up was an open area near Watson Park. It's a nice big open field. It looks like a very easy place. There's already a parking lot there. Well, that's in a Zone 1 wellhead protection zone for the Lyman Street well. You can't put a dog park where your drinking water is being pumped out of the ground. There was locations along School Street that we looked at. They were wet. We were either wet or in an overlay district for groundwater protection. Those ones. So we brought it down to 4 sites that we found. There was one on Carriage Hill. It's a 5-acre parcel with about 2.25 acres available for development. There were some problems with that site. I'll go over later. There's a parcel in Buena Vista that's off of School Street. And as you go down Buena Vista and turn up Greenland, there's a big field there. I think there's an old camper parked there for a decade or two. That's town-owned land. It's open, it's flat, it's actually connected to what people think are trail networks, but they're actually sewer easements. But they're very beautiful land to walk along because we mow them and they're well maintained. So that was another parcel we looked at. And the other two were a Boundary Street parcel and the Senior Center. The Senior Center land, when it was purchased by the town, it was broken up into 3 different parcels. There's one parcel where the Senior Center is. There's another parcel that was dedicated to conservation land, which is kind of up in the back. And then in the front, on Barefoot Road, there was a parcel that is 3.5 acres that was dedicated to recreation. That front portion for recreation is what we looked at. The Boundary Street parcel is a very large parcel of land the town bought in the early 60s when they were anticipating building a sewer treatment plant on the Aspet River. That never came to fruition. We ended up teaming up with Marlboro at the direction of the Department of Public Health to discharge our sanitary sewer to Marlboro. So that parcel is still owned by the town, and it's vacant. So those were the 4 parcels we looked at. We prepared very schematic level ideas on what we could do at each one of them. Conducted a public input and outreach, a public input session with substantial outreach prior to on October 11th. That was done remotely, so we had a lot of public access and availability. We also received a bunch of emails from residents about their thoughts on which parcels they were interested in. I think we had we had 29 participants in the Zoom, so people who were actually logged into the Zoom. And I want to say we had at least 12 people provide comments. The comments were, some comments were just about how much they wanted a dog park. Other comments that came in were specific to which locations the residents were interested in having the dog park sited. There was a few that preferred the Senior Center. The vast majority felt that the Boundary Street site was most appropriate. The Carriage Hill site was shelved relatively quickly. There's a lot of residents in the area. The topography doesn't lend itself well when it comes to the residents. What you don't want to have is a dog park at a higher elevation than the houses, because when the sound comes out, it just goes out, and there's nothing to buffer it. You have a dog park in a valley and a house up on a hill, you're not likely going to hear it. There's a lot of ground to absorb the sound waves that go sideways. So Carriage Hill was discounted pretty quickly. The Buena Vista site was discussed a bit. It's somewhat small because there's some wetlands there, and it's dead flat. So there was a bit of concern that, one, the sound was going to travel, and then 2, that dogs may be utilizing what I referred to earlier as the unofficial trails with the sewer easements. And so sewer easements, while they're nice, they go through what looks like a wooded area, they'll pop out into people's backyards. So what we didn't want to have is people going from the dog park, throwing the dog on a leash, going for a walk down what they think is a trail, and ending up in Billy's backyard. So that left us with the 2 sites, Boundary and the Senior Center. The majority of the residents were interested in Boundary Street. So the next step for the project going forward is the Board of Selectmen on Monday night are going to discuss these 4 sites again. We're going to present the findings of our public input session, as well as what I've just laid out, how we got to where we are at that point on Monday the 5th. And the Board of Selectmen will be determining the site. It is town land, so it's the Board of Selectmen who will determine where the dog park is sited. In preparation for this committee, we worked with our design consultant to come up with costs associated with a conceptual design for the dog park. One of the nice things is the Boundary Street site and the Senior Center site are similar in that they're both wooded currently. They're both relatively flat, and they both have some wetlands. So there's some wetlands adjacent to the railroad tracks at the senior center site, and on the Boundary Street site, there are some wetlands abutting and feeding into the Aspet River. So it lended itself well to coming up with I don't want to say a cookie cutter design, because there is no such thing, and I'm an engineer, so I wouldn't say that. But a design that would be viable at both locations with site-specific modifications. So that's how we came up with the cost. We're not here asking for full funding for the dog park. The expectation is that we would seek grant funding. Lori, our town planner, has gone through the grant funding mechanism in her prior community. It's the Stanton Foundation. They support dog park construction quite a bit from what I learned. And these funds would be married up with Stanton Foundation funds. The next step after the selectmen select the site is the engineer will proceed with a preliminary design and prepare permit level drawings. That's all I have.
So the proposed site, where is it in relationship to the current parking area for the trail access around there on Boundary?
So if you're in the parking area and the trail kind of goes straight back,
Yep.
it's to your left. So the parking area is on DCR land. So abutting the town's parcel there is DCR land, which is to the river and behind the lot, behind the dirt parking lot. To the left and up the hill is all town land. And when you get to the top of the hill, going down toward Route 20, is the sewer department's land. That was purchased, it's referred to as the Heitzman property. That was purchased in the event groundwater injection was needed for a sanitary sewer discharge. So the new parking lot would be left of the existing dirt parking lot.
Like 100 yards, quarter mile?
Oh, yeah, a couple, maybe 150 yards, not far. There is potable water in the street. City of Marlboro has domestic water service down their section of Boundary Street. So it's a weird piece of Boundary Street. The houses, as you go down Boundary Street from Hudson Street on the right-hand side, there's a series of duplexes of housing authority properties, and there's another road, I think it's Windsor, down there, that's town of Northborough, but Boundary Street is Marlboro. So Marlboro paves it, they plow it, that's their road, but there's Northborough addresses on it. It's a little odd down there. So those are the abutters. I've spoken with Marlboro, my counterpart in Marlboro. One, they're in favor of the siting, and they agreed that domestic water is available to us as a abutting municipality. It's one of the things you need a dog park is water.
Other questions?
I have a question. Scott, we've talked amongst staff and as a member of the Housing Authority, we've raised some concerns from our group because we do have the two properties there. One is the Habitat house and the other is owned by managed by the Housing Authority, and they're both family housing. I understand there probably would be a significant buffer in between, but it's my understanding they do utilize well water at those two properties. So that's somewhat of a concern, given your other comments. And also, we're waiting to get an opinion from DHCD if in fact the dog park can be located next to one of their properties, or our properties. We want to just keep that in mind as we move forward with this project, so, thank you.
If the Boundary Street site was to be selected and abutting properties have wells, we would certainly confirm that our design is outside of the cone of influence in accordance with the Board of Health's regulations for private drinking water wells. There are numerous ways to buffer sound with a variety of vegetation and overgrowth and undergrowth. There's a nice tree growth there and some good under shrubs. Serves as a nice sound barrier. In the event that the site is selected, I would provide the Housing Authority and the residents information on other dog parks, and if those neighbors have had concerns. I know there's one in Auburn that's at a large athletic complex, the police department's across the street, and there's some neighbors who live almost right next door. But it's a very similar topography that I described, the dog parks in a hole, the people live up on it. We do what we can to help. Thank you.
I have a question. Maybe you know, Laurie, the actual cost is $594,000, and then you subtract a possible grant from Stanton. What happens if we approve it and Stanton doesn't? Did yours in Millbury get Stanton approval or something? You said you were involved with one.
So this, the Millbury Dog Park was constructed a number of years ago when construction costs were quite a bit lower. So there's a 10% match requirement for construction, so that money was raised exclusively through fundraising. And then the Stanton Foundation paid the balance. So the total cost of the dog park, I think it was constructed in 2014, was just shy of 200,000. So unfortunately, inflation being what it is, construction costs are way more today.
Yeah, I guess my question is more to it, is Stanton Fund typically approves most of their grant applications?
Yeah,
Sounds like it's
so
almost a given.
of course our grant application, we were one of the first municipal dog parks funded, so it was kind of a given. It's my understanding, what they say on their website is they fund 10 dog parks a year. So if you submit your construction grant application early in the year, then you're much more likely to receive funding for that round. They max out, so they offer design grants. The maximum design grant you can get is $22,500. And then they also give construction grants, the maximum is $225,000. So we are interested in applying for the maximum for the design grant and the maximum for the construction grant. They do require you to have the 10% match during the application process, so you have to prove that you have the money in hand in order for them to fund your project. So that's one of the challenges similar to the Historic Commission grant. So if we do not have that minimum 10%, then we cannot apply for the Stanton Foundation money.
One thing we've done in the past, Sean, a couple of years ago, actually, we had a town meeting article to fund a generator replacement at the highway garage for $35,000. It was, the award was, the approval was contingent upon receipt of a FEMA grant. So that's not something that hasn't been done in the community, where the town meeting article indicates that the $347,500 is awarded contingent upon receipt of X, Y, Z.
There is also the possibility of scaling back the project. So our preliminary concept is a 1.2 acre park. So if we were not able to receive the funding, we could always scale back the size of the park. So the smaller the park, then obviously the cheaper the price tag.
So then, one thing that jumped out at me too, and so maybe you could help me, why does it have to be synthetic turf?
For maintenance purposes.
Wouldn't it just, I mean, a couple of years ago, we talked about putting a fence around Yellows Field, and that seemed to be fine.
So
Is synthetic turf required, or is it?
the Millbury Dog Park, so like I said, it's an older dog park. It's been there since 2014. And it was a meadow, a wildflower meadow, before it was fenced in and converted into the dog park. And the area of high intensity play essentially becomes a mud pit. We can't really get grass to grow in that area, so what we did in Millbury is we ended up laying down mulch. However, the mulch turns into mud after a short period of time, so it's a constant maintenance challenge. The mulch has to be replenished, and then ultimately what ends up happening is the grade of your dog park at the entrance gets higher and higher and higher. So in Millbury, we have locations where the fence is significantly lower than the level of the dog park. So the synthetic turf will take care of that problem. Because the entrances is where the heavy area of play occurs.
So it's the design is a large dog area, small dog area, so basically a left and a right. Small synthetic turf areas, and then a large wooded area behind where the dogs can just run around and do their thing. We talked to our designer, who's done quite a few dog parks, said, can we do something else? Is there rock? Can we do pea stone or something? And he said, pea stone is problematic for dogs. They get stuck in their pads. You can't do angular stone, obviously, because they can't walk on angular stone. So the only alternatives are either a natural surface, mulch, or synthetic turf, and those are the alternatives we had. I wish there was a stone or something that they could walk on that's not turf, but it's quite a bit different from the field turf, though.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing that you're gonna hear about shortly. It's not nearly as robust.
Yeah, I'm just curious, it kind of jumped out at me.
Me too. Me too, Sean.
Yeah, the price tag associated with that was a bit of a shock. So.
As is the fencing.
If you get it.
Yeah,
And just grass or sod, would not be practical because you'd constantly be maintaining that, is that your
It
concern?
would just be mud, and we don't have any complaints about muddy dogs. And, anytime you walk in and out of the gate, even in my backyard, to walk in the gate,
So
it's
basically, you're
the
trying to
lowest spot.
minimize the mud capability.
Yeah, if you go the further reaches of the park, where there isn't as heavy level of play activity, the grass tends to do okay.
Sure.
But of course, it has to be mowed on a weekly basis typically. So there's maintenance costs associated with that. There's also the challenge with poison ivy growth. We had that challenge up at the Millbury Dog Park. And of course, there was concerns about wells and, there's a lake nearby and how, the pesticides or the herbicides associated with poison ivy would then contaminate the groundwater and the surface water, and so.
One of our benefits, from a topographic perspective, is the houses are uphill from us, and we're down hydraulic gradient from them. So we're between the homes and the river. And the river is groundwater fed. Groundwater generally runs parallel with the topography, so, their wells are up the underwater river, I guess.
So actually, I see it's actually only 8,000 square feet out of 1.2 acres, so.
No, that's just small dog.
That's a
Small dog's turf and large dog's turf.
Here's a schematic showing generally what the order of magnitude sizes are.
Yeah.
So these are the synthetic turf areas. Big dog, big turf, little dog, little turf.
Yeah.
Small dog, wooded area, large dog, wooded area, or any dog, wooded area, really. So it's just these small areas that, it's, sorry, Sean, but
Yeah.
relatively small areas, okay?
Yeah.
So this shape is very similar to what would fit at the senior center, except this would be shorter and more of a square than a rectangle, and it would be probably more like that. But, square footage would be roughly the same, the amenities would be roughly the same, it's just the geometry would be different to fit into the parcel.
And the senior center, the parking would be in the back of the senior
It
center?
would have a dedicated parking down below, so when you pull into the senior center, immediately on the right-hand side before you go through the S, immediately on the right-hand side is a little bit of a grass area, then woods, and then the railroad. That wooded area is where it is. The front grass area would be a dedicated standalone parking lot just for the dog park. Again, from a topographic perspective, the senior center is kind of uphill from it. And the windows on that side are generally never open. So I don't see it really being a sound nuisance, nor an odor nuisance, because that just doesn't exist with dog parks. It's kind of a fallacy that they smell. They don't.
Let's just say this is hugely successful, which I'm sure it will be. Could the Boundary Street wooded area be increase in
Oh,
the
yeah.
future?
Yeah, you can take
It's
the,
probably the
take the
senior center.
fence and
could,
roll it out and use more fabric.
But the senior center,
Could, no, we'd be maxed out for
what's the total acre boundary? So we have plenty of them.
it.
32 acres.
32 acres plus the sewer division has another
Yeah.
65 acres.
I think it would be hugely popular.
There's a lot, one nice thing about the Boundary Street site is that it also has connectivity to trails. When we were out there on a site visit, we went with the engineer, the landscape architect, to all of our sites to look at them, and people were walking their dogs on leash, but walking their dogs on the trails over at Boundary Street, so. You know, it has trail connectivity, so you could actually walk your dog on a real trail in the woods. I don't know, yeah. It's like a nice spot, it is off the beaten path, it's not easily visible to Norfolk residents, like the senior center, you see it's right there, down Bedford Road. You know, it's very visible, it's easy to control, easy to maintain, you know, you're gonna mow the senior center, you can go in there and do your work, you know, my guys can go in there and do their thing. So each site has its own pluses and
Yeah.
minuses, it's a matter of the selection, weighing out the options and, making a decision on which direction you wanna go.
Mr. Chairman, since we have more projects than money, did the Open Space Rec Committees have a recommendation as to order of priority, as did Historical?
The Open Space Committee did not have a specific discussion about priorities. However, last year, when projects were presented for application, we did support both this dog park as well as the senior center trail. And so I can speak for the committee that we infer our support for these two phase twos. Previous application we spoke about as well as this one, as far as being priority. I think that's fair to say. Back me up, Leslie?
Yep, absolutely.
Not to reiterate the presentation from last year in the dog park, but the dog park was identified as a priority in both the master plan as well as the open space.
Absolutely.
Recreation plans. It was supported by the community.
Not a lot, not enough money, that's all.
It is a challenge. It is a challenge. That's where I think the Open Space Committee stands on it. That moving forward with the two projects already approved would have to take some priority.
How many years has the dog park been in the,
18.
Mr. Chairman, I would hope that at a future CPC meeting, I can come back and present some a little more detailed information on a site that is selected on my.
Good, yes, I would expect, you may ask follow-on to this at the next meeting here. We'll keep the open hearing open for our January meeting to get that feedback, confirmation from the BOS, and any other background information. But in general, the project is so well prepared, was last year too, and so well supported, and the process so far that's been used has been, really first class in every regard, so you've done good homework. Any other questions from the committee? Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for all your time. Thanks, Scott. That brings us to our eighth item on the agenda, which is the Algonquin Regional High School Athletic Complex Project Request. And Mr. Martineau?
No, I'm Keith Lavoy, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Operations for the district.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm joined by Becky Pellegrino. She's our Director of Finance for the
Hey,
schools.
Becky. So it's quite a large request,
Certainly is.
somewhat unexpected by the committee. So we'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to it and the basis for it, and take it from there.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to thank the committee for this opportunity to share with you the Algonquin Athletic Complex project. This is one that has been long overdue for the district, and we do want to get you updated on where we are with everything. So we'll do a couple of things this evening. We're going to talk about our current conditions that we have at Algonquin, as well as the master plan that we're proposing. and then let you know how that is tied to the financials. We have been very fortunate to have an engineer help us along the way, so we are to a 90% cost estimate with full schematics of what we would like to do. And obviously, will be a joint venture between both Northborough and Southborough. You can advance that slide.
Sorry.
No problem. All right, great.
Snapped ahead.
It snapped, no problem. So like I said, my name is Keith LaVoy, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Operations. This is Becky Pellegrino, she's the Director of Finance. The Regional School Committee did decide to form a building committee to make sure that all the needs of this project were being held in check. We do have a representative from each community that are co-chairs. One is David Roman, he is a representative from Northborough. And our representative from Southborough is Paul Desmond, who also serves on the Regional School Committee. So like I mentioned, we will provide an overview of where we are, a financial breakdown, and certainly be able to answer any questions. And if we can't answer those questions this evening, we'll certainly get back to you when we can. So an overview of the project. Images aren't too bad. But there are really 4 areas that we want to highlight with the current conditions that demonstrate the need for this project. The first being the track. The track is an asphalt surface that was installed in 1994 and was not part of the 2004 renovation project. Although the surface has been maintained, the patching has failed. There is ponding water throughout the space, which it does impede its use, and there are significant cracks which create some tripping hazards. And in some cases, other high schools have refused to compete on the track due to its current condition. So that is definitely at the top of the list of what we need to have done in the near future. The second piece is the lighting. The lighting that is only illuminating the stadium field has also created a few safety issues. There are dark spots in certain areas where the lights do blind athletes for different forms of athletic competition. And these were also part of a 1994 installation. The tennis courts were part of the 2004 renovation project, and I think they have suffered from New England weather. It is an asphalt court, so certainly over time it has gotten to its end of useful life, which is just about getting to 20 years. There has been patching that has been done, but we still have significant cracking throughout the location. And the last one is, as a highlight, is the field conditions, and overall, the fields, and especially the expansion of the fields, all the grass fields are in really good condition. The stadium field did get a overseeding and top dressing during the 2004 renovation, but it was not replaced. So I think over the years, that particular space has taken a beating from overuse, and it has been compacted. It also has insignificant drainage, so that there are cooling and puddling in that area, which we would like to have rectified with the project. And I think overall, one of the things that we're finding is with the expansion of programs, not only at Algonquin, but hopefully with the use from the community, our grass fields need rest, and that's why this project does lean towards a synthetic turf to really expand the functionality of the space for the entire communities of both Northborough and Southborough.
And we also want to point out too that the grandstands and the press box are not ADA compliant, so this
Correct.
project would bring this facility into ADA compliance.
That is correct. So as far as the master plan and the goals for the project is certainly we want to create an environment for students and for staff to learn and compete, as well as additional recreation opportunities for both towns and communities, specifically by way of the use of the track and the tennis and pickleball courts, which would be part of the project. The other addition, which is not currently part of the complex, is an amphitheater, which will be located, and I'll show this on the next slide of its exact location, for the performing arts. We want to make sure when we were doing the planning for this, we want to expand it to as many different groups as possible. We didn't see it only as an athletic complex, but a community center, and really felt the amphitheater would draw that in. Certainly the recreation programs could benefit, and this would be in addition to youth sports. There's a high demand for field usage, and many of you probably know this. Frequently we get calls at the high school for use, whether it be on weekends or different times of the year, and unfortunately we have to turn groups away, even in-town groups, because we need to give our fields a rest. And they are desired, they're a highly desired area, but we have had to say no just to give our grass fields a break. So the master plan. Thank you. The master plan would include, and like I said, this is part of the 90% cost estimate you have received in the schematic design, so we have done some extensive research to the area. The footprint that would not be expanded in any way. This is the existing footprint that Algonquin Athletics does currently use. It'd be using that, and let's push it up. That's great, Mark. So what it would include is the replacement of the track. It would remain a 6-lane track. A replacement of the stadium field with a synthetic turf surface. Like Becky said, it would include the replacement of the grandstand, which would bring it to ADA compliance. This would include an elevator to the press box, as well as ramping to the seating for optimal viewing of the stadium field. Bless you. It would also include the replacement of the lights with an LED stadium light to improve the overall safety. We did see a few demonstrations of this, and it's quite amazing what the new lights are capable of doing. So that's an exciting improvement that we'd like to make. And then to the east, you'll see what is commonly known as the JV field. We would be converting that name and calling it a multi-purpose field so that it really expands its functionality. So that is the turf field that would be to the east. The other thing preliminarily we're trying to do is, at minimum, get the infrastructure for lighting out on that space, which doesn't currently exist. So that would be an expansion of what we currently have at Algonquin. The hope would be to also light a second field, which would really expand its functionality, but we're going to see how things go for that. Like I mentioned before, the tennis courts would not be any different footprint that currently exists. There are 9 courts there, and we're expecting to replace that with 9 courts. 2 of which would be also lined for pickleball, which we did get conferred that it can still hold all state tournaments, even when they have pickleball lined, although I don't believe it's going to become a varsity sport anytime soon, which I'm sure is to many chagrin. So at this point, I do want to pass it over to Becky. It is obviously a very large project. I know you mentioned, John, a little unexpected, but we do want to make sure that the financial breakdown is understood as best we can here, and we'll definitely answer questions. And then certainly with the help of Greg here as well, we'll be able to round it out for everyone. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky, who will share the numbers with you.
Thank you. So as Keith mentioned, we have been working with Gale Associates, and at this point, we are at the 90% design, I guess, threshold of this project. The total estimated cost for the project is, as you can see, just over $7.5 million. We did work with Gale, and we have actually had some conversations too at the state level with the CPC, the commission, and they have advised us as to what is eligible and what would not be eligible for CPC funding. So we are aware that the turf fields are not, and then of the fill that's part of that field would not be eligible. And then there's also a question, since it may be considered a stadium, as to whether or not the grandstands would also be eligible for CPC funding. So we have broken out what would be eligible, and that would be about $6 million, and then 1.5 would not be eligible. We, as part of the regional agreement, both communities would be responsible for a portion of this project. And our regional agreement does break it out based on enrollments over the previous 4 years. So you can see that Northborough's portion of this project would be 62.33%. And so at this point in time, we would anticipate that their portion of the project would be just under $4.7 million in total. Now, I do want to, if we could just move on to the next slide, because one thing that we have, we're working off a PDF, we're just doing the presentation. One thing that we have talked about internally is our request to the Northborough CPC. And what we would like to request at this time, as opposed to the larger amount that was submitted, is the portion for the tennis courts, to have those redone. And you can see that is $352,701.56. That is based off of the 90% cost estimate for this project. So we are revising our request to the board based on internal conversations. But you can see that we really do have a full project. We have a number of items that we're excited about. in terms of the amphitheater, bringing something new into the field. And then we do also appreciate the safety aspect of the lighting, the walkways, and then bringing it into ADA compliance. So at this point, if there are any questions.
What would be the process if you don't receive CPC funding? It's just, all of it is going to go to a debt thing on town meeting?
We are preparing a warrant article, yes, for the remaining amount. We would be actually preparing 2 warrant articles, one that would be for the full project, and then one that would be contingent based on whether this project was approved by the CPC.
In both, or one.
And we have presented this to the Southborough CPC as well.
Have they confirmed that they can spend money in Northborough from the Southborough CPC?
They have.
They have.
Have they voted?
They have not yet.
They have.
How did they confirm that?
Attorney.
Attorney, yeah, with their counsel.
Seriously? Interesting.
When you indicated it could be used for recreational activities for youth sports, would there be a fee attached to that?
There'd be part of the rental agreement, facilities rental agreement, and certainly for residents is at a reduced rate. So it would be comparable to what we have now. Youth football does use it pretty extensively, so I can imagine that would continue, and also, as well as other sports. We have had to turn away certain types of events, like larger tournaments and things like that, because of overuse. And we do feel like this would expand the ability to rent the facility with greater frequency.
And I would-
So in effect, you're charging the same funding group for using it? Because the funding comes from the parents of the kids who are using the facility.
It also would have the ability, especially with the synthetic turf, to go beyond what we're currently allowing. So we can see it being rented to private companies for use.
I'm more concerned about the cost
For the town.
to
To the town.
kids in town.
Yeah.
If I can just
The
point out.
parents are paying for the facility, and then you're paying additionally to use the facility.
The funds that would be collected, though, would be used to, for the upkeep of the facility, because there are going to, things that are gonna be needed,
It gets to be
especially
pretty
with this.
expensive though if you add on the use fee for kids at the school anyway, for parking or sports or activities. Like a baseball game could cost $200 for a Babe Ruth program.
For a season,
No, for a game.
for a rental, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, that is possible.
So that's my point. It's the same group paying is now paying to use it, right?
Yes, I can see that, yeah, that would be part of what happens now, that wouldn't be very different than what
Yeah,
occurs now.
and I'm not saying I'm happy with what happens now.
I understand. I gather that. So it wouldn't be a change in that, it would be.
But I would suspect the fees would go up.
They may, but we haven't gotten to that point. Some of the fees certainly at the town level have sustained things pretty decently, so we
Won't go
can't see
down.
it triple, well,
And I would say too, that, you know, even with our facilities both at the K through 8 in Northborough and at the high school, right now, a lot of our town organizations are really, you know, there's a small utility charge, and then they're paying for the custodian to be on staff. You know, for the facility, for the actual field, we would have to come up with rates for towns, but we generally do have a more favorable rate, if any, for our community sports.
So our
And
intent,
we've worked-
I mean, I can just
yeah.
add that our intention is not to, you know, have extra costs on backs of our, you know, town programs, you know, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse. I think there's currently a favorable rate right now, and there is, if you are a town program, the rate is far reduced from if you are a private organization. I think this would allow us to generate a lot more revenue from private organizations, adult sports clubs and so forth, that we just can't access right now. And we've also talked about using those fees that we collect to go directly back into the maintenance of the field for short-term and long-term.
Have you revised your request to South Pro for the same, just for the tennis?
Not formally, no.
Is that your intention?
I believe so, yes.
How did you arrive at the plan to request only for tennis courts? What was the logic?
So one of the things we did learn of when we presented to South Pro CPC is what capacity they had. So the 30% that we requested, they did not have the capacity to fund that amount. So it's also just making sure that we're in alignment with what CPC has capacity from Southborough and also being realistic from the Northwest perspective. And it's also probably in terms of the community use, the part of the current facility that gets mostly used by the community.
Are the tennis courts today open to the public,
They are, after hours,
weekends?
yes. And they're quite heavily used. Even in cold weather. I've seen people out there. And walking the track, I mean, I do see people walking the grounds with a high level of frequency, so I can see this being attractive, you know, in ways for both communities, but certainly for those that use it now, I can see this only improving it for them and their experience.
There's no doubt that the high school itself is a terrific resource for our communities. The athletic fields and tracks are a part of that. I don't think anyone would argue that. We just, it's unusual to come to the CPA for the funding for it. I suspect you're trying to see if you can offset what the total would be and make it more amenable at town meetings in both towns.
Yes.
But the town has supported the school quite well over the years. Each year's budget, except for the building of the renovations itself, that was a bit tenuous. I've been in town 27 years, so. But it was a successful project and well-run, and I suspect field renovation would be as well, so. I guess
We
I'm
did
not sure
pay
what
to
you're, not sure what you're
resurface.
worried about.
Now that's what we're hoping for.
That's good. We did pay to resurface the basketball courts at at least in the middle school.
Middle and, yeah, several courts, correct?
We paid for the lighting.
You
We
confirm.
paid for the lighting
In the
in the
middle
middle,
school.
so it's not,
The
Look at the
lighting was,
presidents, yeah.
lighting was a rec department. Those were all rec department requests, not the school though.
but it was at the school.
Right.
The point
Is
is,
that
it's not unlike us to have done this.
Fair to say. They were strictly, you know, well, yeah, fair to say.
I mean, I think physically you're right, but I think the fact that it's the rec department for rec department programs does differentiate it.
Well, wouldn't this become under rec?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges now is really hard for a rep to access these fields because of the.
Well, that was
requirement for
gonna be my point, and I'm not in youth sports coaching anymore as I was, but I don't recall that the youth sports had very much access to the Algonquin fields on a regular basis. Am I out of place there, Sean, or?
No, I'd say that is accurate, and I think that's one of the reasons why we certainly wanted to look to the multi-purpose field as well as the stadium field to expand that access
expand it.
beyond just Algonquin athletics, because with the use that it's getting now and the programs that have been expanded over the years, the use is great, and we try to get every ounce of it as we can, but it does need to rest. And if it doesn't rest, we'll see that, and like as Scott said earlier, the mud that it can become. Certainly in the middle of the field, of the JV field, which also serves as the rugby, which is a new sport for Algonquin, has definitely had an impact on that. So yes, I would say that this would provide expanded opportunities for recreation in both towns.
Because it would be turf.
Because it would be perfect, in not just one location, but two.
John, would it be appropriate to ask for rec department to weigh in on this?
Sure, not inappropriate. But we do not have a representative.
Right, but-
Oh, we have Sean. He's weighing over here.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
He's doing a good job. I appreciate your point. Unfortunately, you stated correctly, CPA can't be used for turf.
Correct.
And that precedent goes back 10-plus years. There must have been a run on schools wanting to do turf fields, and I don't remember the premise for why it became disallowed.
I know that could,
The lawsuit, new,
is that so? I do know that the.
What was the base, what was the basis for the suit at that time?
the initial CPA account didn't accommodate for recreational per se. They
Well, it
had-
didn't accommodate for renovating
Right, it had
if you had not bought it with
Right.
CPA,
So
right?
then it took a few years to manipulate, to change the law so that rec facilities that hadn't been purchased through CPA monies could be renovated.
Which we have now, but the turf restriction was kept.
That was specifically a citizen's challenge. I think it was the town of Newton.
Okay.
That's why it's so specific. Turf fields, that was the nature of that lawsuit.
Understood. Will you be making a revised application that you'd like us to consider?
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote it down, but
Thank
it's pretty clear, and it's certainly a lot easier to envision it than, 1.5 million, because we don't have that. Right. I mean, in the world of things we've done with CPA, we have borrowed with payments coming from CPA funds, and we're paying for the White building right now by that same means. But I can't imagine going to town meeting to borrow for this against CPA when we would normally ask the town to borrow or fund it. So that wouldn't seem to me to be an appropriate path for CPA to use. So we'd be looking at, is there any way to include this in our current revenue and reserves? And I don't know how many applications you sat through, but we have a big challenge because we have a couple of programs in phase 2 that would naturally take priority because they'd already been approved at town meeting, and an obligation every year, as I just mentioned, to pay a White Cliffs bond payment. If we just added those 3, we're already beyond the new revenue that we expect. And so we'd be looking at our unreserved account, and so, so there's some tough decisions, but.
No, and I think just in terms of, we're seeking all opportunities for funding of this project, and, I think the CPA has done some great projects, really exciting, and part of this is our due diligence, to make sure that we're going through all of the proper channels and communicating and making sure we're asking all the right folks. So we respect the position you're in, but also appreciate your consideration, but understand that there's competing factors.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee?
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for your time and your preparation. I
You're
appreciate
welcome. Absolutely.
And I apologize I was late.
That's okay.
Anytime.
I called him you, so
That's fine.
you don't look that
The
dissimilar.
bald head.
I'm sorry. Very good. So the hour is 9:07. We did pretty darn good toward our goal. Two remaining items, or two remaining applications in our list, one of which is really the only other application, is the Conservation Fund request sponsored by the Open Space Committee. The Open Space Committee wanted to submit a request. We feel funding the Conservation Fund on a continuous basis is a priority. You all know we've used the Conservation Fund productively in many cases for acquiring and preserving parcels of land. Recognizing the challenges that the committee will have, we still wanted it to be included. And so that's a $77,000 request. If there's a question from a committee member about it, please speak up. Otherwise, I don't think it needs any more review at tonight's meeting. Hearing none. Pile that here. And The 10th item was around affordable housing. It was not an application, but only a request from the Housing Authority, from Rick Leaf of the Northborough Affordable Housing Corporation to contribute at least the minimum to the Affordable Housing Reserve, which of course we're obligated to do. And also that the committee consider reauthorizing unspent funds previously approved at town meeting, which we have considered each year. Rick Leaf and NEHC will appear at our January meeting by prior agreement. So we'll pass over that. We have minutes to approve. And I know you've all studied them.
Move to accept November 3rd minutes.
Second.
Motion from Jeff, second from Todd. Any questions on the minutes or discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes? All against?
Actually, I wasn't here, so I have to abstain.
One abstained, so we have
Ditto.
2 abstained. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 2 abstained. Thank you. And the only other piece of business is to agree that our next meeting could be January 5.
That's the first Thursday?
It is the first Thursday. Still work for everybody?
Yep.
And we also have the first Thursday in February, which is the 2nd. And right now, I'll assume we can get our business done between those 2 meetings and be in good shape for presenting our recommendations to town staff. So looks good. If members agree that we should keep the open hearing open for the next meeting, that should be part of our motion to close this meeting. So we would adjourn this meeting but maintain the open hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Leslie and Jeff. All in favor of closing this meeting and maintaining the open hearing? All, any, not in favor? None? We are unanimous 7-0 to adjourn.